I came home from the funeral and found another woman's toothbrush in the sink. Pink. Electric. Still plugged into the outlet where my mother used to charge her reading light. My name is Jack Mercer. I'm 49, a senior civil engineer for the city of Spokane. I just buried the woman who became my only parent after Dad's illness. The house felt different, wrong. I walked through rooms I'd known since childhood, and everything had shifted. New throw pillows on the couch, different coffee in the kitchen. The air smelled like vanilla candles instead of the lavender soap Mom always used. Paige emerged from the hallway carrying a laundry basket. My sister-in-law, Lana's younger sister, 28, unemployed, usually bouncing between friends' couches and part-time retail jobs. "Oh, hey Jack." She didn't look surprised to see me. "Sorry about your mom. She was really sweet." I nodded. "Wait, Lana said you wouldn't mind if I stayed here for a while. Just until I get back on my feet, you know." The words hit like cold water. I didn't respond immediately. In my line of work, you learn to measure twice before you cut. Same principle applied here. "Where's Lana?" "Getting groceries. She'll be back soon." I walked past Paige into my mother's bedroom. The bed was made, with sheets I didn't recognize. Paige's clothes hung in the closet where Mom's dresses used to be. Her makeup covered the dresser. This wasn't temporary. This was settled. The front door opened. Lana's voice carried through the house, bright and casual. "Jack, you here?" I found her in the kitchen, unpacking grocery bags, like this was normal, like nothing had changed. "Paige just needed a place," she said without looking up. "Better than letting it sit empty, right?" That phrase, letting it sit empty, as if the house was already vacant, as if it had been waiting. "The locks," I said. "Oh yeah." Paige felt safer with new ones, you understand. I understood plenty. What I didn't understand was how my wife had made this decision without asking me, how she'd moved her sister into a house that wasn't hers to offer Mom's things, boxed up in the garage. "Don't worry, we saved everything important." Lana smiled, the same smile she'd used at the funeral when people offered condolences. Practiced, appropriate. I walked to the small secretary desk by the window, the drawer where Mom kept her important papers. I pulled it open. Empty. Well, almost empty. A half-folded receipt from Worson's florist tucked in the back corner. Roses for someone's anniversary. Not recent. Where her documents? What documents? Legal papers, the will, property records. Lana's smile flickered, just for a second. "Oh, those. I think the lawyer has everything. You know how these things work." I didn't know how these things worked, but I was starting to learn. Mom had mentioned a safety deposit box once, downtown, near the old bank branch where she'd done business for decades. I'd never asked for details, never thought I'd need them. Now I would. I spent another 20 minutes in the house. Paige offered me coffee. Lana asked about work. Normal conversation, surface level, pleasant. The whole time I was cataloging changes. Mom's reading chair, gone. The family photos from the mantel replaced with generic artwork. Even the kitchen curtains were different. They'd erased her in 3 days? How long does it take to move someone in completely? How long to change locks, rearrange furniture, stock a refrigerator? More than 3 days. This had been planned. I thanked them both and left. Didn't argue. Didn't ask questions. Just nodded and walked out of the house, where I'd spent every Christmas morning for 49 years. That night, I sat in my home office with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. My filing cabinet stood in the corner, organized the way Mom had taught me. Important papers in the top drawer, always keep copies. I pulled out the certified title deed, dated 3 years ago when Mom decided to simplify her estate planning. Clean, legal language, no ambiguity. John Arthur Mercer, sole owner. My name, not Lana's, Not both of us, or joint ownership, just me. I'd never questioned why Mom made that choice. She was 76, practical, and wanted things settled. I was her only child. It made sense. Now I wondered if she'd seen something I'd missed. The house was legally mine, had been for 3 years, but somehow, in the space between the funeral and now, it had become theirs. They'd moved fast, efficient, like they'd been ready. It wasn't the house that bothered me, not really. It was the ease of it, the casual way Lana had decided what belonged to whom, the assumption that I wouldn't notice, wouldn't care, wouldn't act. Maybe she was right about some of that, but she was wrong about the part that mattered most. I set the deed on my desk and reached for my phone. Tomorrow, I'd start asking better questions, starting with Mom's attorney. She didn't ask permission. That wasn't an oversight. That was the point. I drove back to Mom's house the next morning, told Lana I needed to check the furnace and fix a loose step on the back porch. Maintenance issues. Normal landlord stuff. Except I wasn't the landlord anymore, apparently. Paige answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater. She'd made herself coffee, using Mom's favorite mug, the blue one with World's Best Grandma that I'd bought her last Christmas. "Jack, come on in. The step thing is probably nothing, but thanks for checking." I nodded and headed straight for the basement, spent 10 minutes examining a furnace that ran perfectly fine, came back upstairs, and walked through the house like I was looking for problems. Really, I was looking for evidence. The secretary desk drawer was still empty, but now I noticed something else. The small filing cabinet beside it, where Mom kept legal documents, insurance papers, anything important, was gone entirely. Not moved, gone. "Paige, where's the little file cabinet that used to be here?" She glanced over from the couch where she was scrolling through her phone. "Oh, that old thing. Lana said it was just taking up space. We donated it last week." Donated, along with whatever was inside it. I finished my fake inspection and left, drove straight downtown to the law office of Dilly & Associates, same building where Mom had done business for 20 years. Mr. Dilly was old school, leather-bound books, wooden furniture, the kind of lawyer who still used a fountain pen. He'd handled Mom's will, her property transfers, everything legal in her life since Dad died. "Jack, my condolences again. Your mother was a remarkable woman." "Thank you, Mr. Dilly. I wanted to clarify something about the house, the inheritance." He pulled a thick file from his cabinet, flipped through pages covered in legal language and official stamps. "Straightforward bequest. House goes to you solely. No joint ownership, no strings attached." She was very specific about that. I felt something release in my chest. Confirmation. Good. That's what I thought. But I wanted to be sure. Mr. Dilly paused, looked at me over his reading glasses. "Actually, that reminds me. Lana brought in a transfer form about a week before the funeral. Said you'd requested it. Something about adding her name to the deed for tax purposes." The room got quiet. Too quiet. "I never requested anything like that." "That's what I figured when you didn't come in to sign it. The form is still here, unsigned. Want to see it?" He handed me a document titled Quitclaim Deed Transfer. Clean, official. It would have transferred half ownership of Mom's house to Lana Mercer. All it needed was my signature. My wife had tried to steal half my inheritance while Mom was still alive. "Mr. Dilly, did Lana ever try something like this before?" He hesitated, professional discretion warring with something else. "Well, this stays between us, but yes. A few years back, when your father got sick, she came in wanting to streamline ownership of your family home. Make it joint property for easier management, she said. Dad had been dying of cancer, barely coherent those last months. What happened? Your father refused to sign. Said the house was yours, not hers. Told me to make sure his will reflected that. I stared at the unsigned transfer form. This wasn't grief-driven confusion. This wasn't Paige needing a temporary place to stay. This was a pattern. I thanked Mr. Dilly and drove across town to see Eli Turner, old friend from high school, retired county clerk who'd moved into real estate. If anyone could help me understand what was really happening, it was Eli. He worked out of a small office near the courthouse, maps on every wall, filing cabinets full of property records, the kind of guy who knew every lot line and zoning variance in Spokane County. Jack Mercer. Hell, I'm sorry about your mom, she was good people. Thanks, Eli. I need a favor. Professional favor. I explained the situation. Eli listened without interrupting, the way he used to when we were kids and someone was telling a story that didn't quite add up. You want me to pull records on your mom's house. Everything you can find, recent activity especially. Eli fired up his computer, started typing. 20 minutes later, he had a stack of printouts spread across his desk. Here's what I found. Full property deed history going back to 1987. Clean title, no liens, everything in order. He flipped to another page. But here's the interesting part. Someone submitted ownership documents 2 weeks ago, filed, then withdrawn the same day. What kind of documents? Transfer paperwork. Would have changed the deed from sole ownership to joint ownership. Your name and, let me see, Lana Mercer. The same thing she'd tried with Mr. Dilly. She'd been working multiple angles. There's more, Eli said. I ran the address through business filing records, found an LLC registered last month, Two Pines Ventures. Guess who owns it? He handed me another printout, Lana's name in black and white. An LLC for what? Eli's expression darkened. Property management, short-term rentals, the works. He pulled up something on his computer screen, turned the monitor toward me. And, here's the kicker, found this in the draft listings for Airbnb, not live yet, but submitted for approval. The listing showed mom's house, professional photos, detailed description, nightly rates. Charming vintage home in quiet neighborhood, perfect for weekend getaways. The contact email belonged to Paige. I sat back in my chair. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they made was ugly. Paige wasn't staying there temporarily. She was prepping the house to become a business, Lana's business. How long has this been planned? Based on the LLC filing and the listing draft, at least 6 weeks, maybe longer. 6 weeks ago, Mom was still alive, sick but alive. They'd been planning this while I was driving her to doctor appointments. Really, I need to stop this. What are my options? Legally, it's your house. You can evict anyone you want. But in Washington, even without a lease, squatters can claim tenant rights if they stay long enough. How long? 30 days, maybe less, if they can prove they were invited to stay. I'd been thinking like an engineer, measure twice, cut once, but this wasn't a construction project with unlimited time for planning. This was a countdown. I need a lawyer, a real estate lawyer. Billy gave me a name. Sarah Chen, downtown practice, specialized in property disputes. I called from his office and got an appointment for that afternoon. Sarah Chen was everything Mr. Dilly wasn't. Young, sharp, digital, everything. She listened to my story and started typing before I finished talking. We filed today, she said. Notice of unlawful occupancy, formal eviction request. In Washington, we have to give 72 hours notice, but we can set the sheriff date for 10 days out. Will that hold up? With the property deed and the evidence of unauthorized business activity? Absolutely. But Jack, here's the thing. We do this exactly by the book. One mistake, one missed deadline, and they buy themselves another month. She was already drafting documents. I won't touch the locks, won't change utilities, won't give them any excuse to claim harassment. We let the law do the work. That afternoon, the papers were filed, notice served, clock started. 10 days until the sheriff knocked on the door. I drove home and had dinner with Lana like nothing had changed. She asked about my day. I told her about a bridge inspection project. Normal married conversation. She had no idea the countdown had started. The whole time, I kept thinking about something Mr. Dilly had said. Dad knew. Even dying, even barely conscious, He'd seen what Lana was and made sure the house stayed in the family. Maybe I'd been seeing it too, I just hadn't been ready to admit it. But ready or not, the clock was running. She thought she had time. She didn't know the clock was mine. The next morning, I called in a personal day at work, told my supervisor I needed to handle some family business related to Mom's estate. Not a lie, technically. I drove to the house around 10. Paige answered the door with wet hair and a coffee mug in her hand. "Jack, you're here early. Just wanted to check on that loose step again, make sure it's holding." The step was fine, had been fine yesterday, but it gave me an excuse to walk around, observe, document. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Nothing obvious, just casual shots of the house. For insurance purposes, I told Paige when she asked. Really, I was building evidence. The living room with Mom's furniture replaced. The kitchen with new appliances I didn't recognize. The bedroom where Paige had made herself completely at home. Each photo was time-stamped, dated, admissible. I spent 20 minutes playing the concerned homeowner. Asked about the heating bill, the water pressure, whether she'd noticed any maintenance issues. Paige chatted easily, like we were old friends, like this was normal. "Actually," she said, "I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you about maybe making this more permanent. You know, official." Interesting choice of words. What do you mean by official? Well, I've been thinking about staying long-term. Maybe we could work out some kind of rental agreement. I could pay you monthly, take care of the place properly. I nodded thoughtfully. That's something to consider. Let me think about it. What I was really thinking was how easily she'd just confessed to planning a long-term occupation, on camera, since my phone was still recording. I left after an hour, drove straight to Sarah Chin's office, and uploaded everything to her secure server. "Perfect," she said, scrolling through the photos. "This establishes unauthorized modification of the property. The timestamps prove they continued occupying after legal notice was served." "What about her offer to pay rent?" Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "That's an admission that no rental agreement currently exists. She just handed us proof that she's been staying there without permission." I went back to the house 3 more times over the next week. Each visit was friendly, casual, unremarkable. I checked different things each time, took more photos, gathered more evidence. Lana asked why I was visiting so often. "Just want to make sure everything's okay," I said. "It's still Mom's place in my head, you know? I feel responsible." She bought it. Or pretended to. On my 4th visit, I found something that changed everything. Paige was out, job interview, she'd said. I was alone in the house, supposedly fixing his squeaky door hinge. I walked through the kitchen to get to my toolbox and saw it on the counter. An invoice from Bradley's locksmith service, dated 5 days after the funeral. Changed all locks per owner request, Paige M. I stared at that piece of paper for a full minute. Owner request, not tenant request or resident request. Owner request. Paige had told the locksmith she owned the house. I photographed the invoice from 3 different angles, made sure the company name, date, and signature were all clearly visible. This wasn't just unauthorized occupancy anymore. This was fraud. I called Sarah Chen from the car. "Sarah, I need to know something. If someone represents themselves as the owner of a property they don't own and uses that false claim to change locks, that's criminal fraud, potentially a felony depending on the value of the property and the intent to permanently deprive the rightful owner. What if I have written proof? Bring it in, now." An hour later, Sarah was making copies of the locksmith invoice and adding it to her case file. "Jack, this is a game changer. The eviction was already solid, but this gives us grounds for criminal charges if we want to pursue them." Do we want to pursue them? Let's see how they respond to the eviction first. Sometimes the threat is enough. That afternoon, my phone rang, Sarah's office. "We have a problem," she said. "Sheriff's office is asking for a delay, and they want an additional 72-hour posting period." Why? Apparently someone called, claiming there's a valid rental agreement. They want time to review the documentation. Someone? I knew exactly who that someone was. Can they do that? Legally, yes. They have to be careful about tenant rights, even in eviction cases. The good news is we have evidence proving no rental agreement exists. The bad news is this could drag out another week. A week we didn't have. Every day Paige stayed in that house, she could claim more tenant protections. Every day was another chance for Lana to file paperwork, create false documents, muddy the legal waters. I needed to accelerate the timeline. Sarah, what if we could prove they were using the property for unlicensed commercial activity? That would expedite everything. Commercial use without permits violates zoning laws and invalidates any tenant protections. Why? Give me an hour. I called Eli Turner. Eli, that LLC account for Two Pines Ventures, which bank? First National downtown. Why? I need to make a withdrawal. I drove to First National with a folder full of documents, court papers, property deed, LLC registration, screenshots of the Airbnb listing, everything that proved Lana and Paige were trying to monetize a property they didn't own. The bank manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Wells, listened to my explanation with growing concern. Mr. Mercer, if what you're saying is true, this account was opened under false pretenses. I have documentation proving it. She reviewed every page carefully, made copies, consulted with someone over the phone. We're freezing the account pending investigation, she said finally. Any deposits or withdrawals will be held until this is resolved. How long does that take? Could be weeks, could be months, depends on what our fraud department finds. Perfect. I drove back to Sarah's office and gave her the update. The bank freeze is helpful, she said, but it's not enough to expedite the eviction. We need something that directly impacts the property itself. What about the State Revenue Department? Sarah looked up from her notes. What about them? If Two Pines Ventures was planning to run an unlicensed short-term rental business, wouldn't that be a tax issue? She was already reaching for her phone. Jack, you beautiful genius. Yes, it absolutely would be. An hour later, Sarah had filed a formal complaint with the Washington State Department of Revenue. Unlicensed commercial activity, tax evasion, use of residential property for business purposes without proper permits. This makes the bank freeze official, she explained, and it flags the property for immediate compliance review. No judge is going to protect tenant rights when the tenants were running an illegal business. I went home that evening and cooked dinner for Lana. Salmon, her favorite. We talked about work, about plans for the weekend, about everything except the fact that her carefully constructed scheme was collapsing in real time. She had no idea that her bank account was frozen, no idea that the state was investigating her LLC, no idea that the sheriff would be knocking on Mom's door in 3 days. She thought she was winning. That night, I sat in my office reviewing the timeline. 10 days since Mom's funeral. 7 days since I'd discovered Paige living in the house. 5 days since I'd filed the eviction papers. Everything had moved exactly as planned. Every piece had fallen into place. Engineers build things to last. We plan for stress loads, environmental factors, system failures. We don't leave anything to chance. This wasn't any different. Lana had made 2 crucial mistakes. First, she'd underestimated how much I knew about legal processes and documentation. Second, she'd assumed I would react emotionally instead of systematically. She was wrong on both counts. The clock was still running, but now it was running down to 0. And when it hit 0, the sheriff would be there to make it official. 3 more days. The sheriff knocked at 9:03. Paige was still in pajamas. I watched from my car across the street as Deputy Martinez walked up to Mom's front door, official clipboard in hand, badge gleaming in the morning sun. 3 sharp knocks, professional, final. Paige opened the door with a coffee mug in her hand. I could see her face change as Martinez identified himself and handed her the papers. Confusion first, then panic. She stepped back into the house, left the door open, started making phone calls. The first call lasted 30 seconds, probably went to voicemail. The second call connected. I could hear her voice carrying across the street, high and urgent. Not the words, just the tone. Fear wrapped in indignation. Martinez waited patiently on the porch. He'd done this before. 40 minutes later, Lana's car pulled into the driveway fast enough to leave skid marks. She jumped out and marched toward the house like she was ready for a fight. Power suit, designer heels, the whole armor she wore when she wanted to intimidate someone. I got out of my car and walked across the street. "Jack!" Lana's voice cut through the morning air. "What the hell is this?" I nodded to Deputy Martinez. He nodded back. "Ma'am," Martinez said to Lana, "are you the homeowner?" "I'm his wife. We own this property together." "Actually, ma'am, according to the county records, the property is owned solely by John Arthur Mercer. That would be this gentleman here." Martinez gestured toward me. Lana turned to face me. Her expression was a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Jack, tell him. Tell him we both own this house." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila folder, handed it to her without saying a word. She opened it. Her face went pale as she read the first document. "Certified copy of the property deed. My name only." The second document made her hands start shaking. Screenshots of the Airbnb listing. Mom's house advertised as charming vintage home in quiet neighborhood. Paige's email address as the contact. The third document finished the job. LLC registration for Two Pines Ventures. Lana's signature at the bottom. "Where did you get these?" I didn't answer. Just stood there, watching her realize how completely she'd been caught. Deputy Martinez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I need to complete the eviction process. Anyone residing in this property needs to vacate within the next 4 hours." Paige appeared in the doorway, now dressed but still looking shell-shocked. "4 hours? I need time to find somewhere to go. To pack my things." "Ma'am, you've had legal notice for 10 days. The time for preparation has passed." Lana was still staring at the papers in her hands. "Jack, we need to talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said quietly. "Just consequences." I walked back to my car and drove away, left them to figure out the logistics of undoing what they'd built. By noon, my phone was buzzing with calls from Lana. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drove to Sarah's office for the final phase. "How did it go?" she asked. "Clean. Professional. No drama?" "Good, because we're not done yet." She handed me another stack of documents. "Sheriff's report is filed with the county. Property record now officially notes confirmed sole ownership, John A. Mercer. That protects you from any future claims." "What about the Airbnb listing?" "Suspended for fraud. Turns out when you report a listing as using a property without owner permission, they take it very seriously. Paige's account is permanently banned." Sarah pulled up something on her computer. Eli Turner filed a report with the local HOA about unauthorized commercial use of residential property. That creates a paper trail if they try this again somewhere else. And the revenue investigation? Already opened. Two Pines Ventures is under review for undeclared short-term rental revenue and property fraud. The state takes tax evasion seriously, especially when it involves real estate. I leaned back in my chair, every angle covered, every loose end tied up. "There's one more thing," Sarah said. "Your mother's attorney called. Something about a safety deposit box?" I'd almost forgotten. Mom had mentioned it once, years ago. A box at the old downtown branch where she kept things that mattered. Mr. Dilly met me at First National an hour later. We went to the vault together, him with his key, me with the one he'd given me from Mom's effects. Box 247. Small, narrow, the kind people use for documents and jewelry. Inside, insurance papers, her birth certificate, Dad's military medals, and an envelope with my name written in Mom's careful handwriting. I opened it right there in the vault. A letter, dated 2 years earlier. Her writing was shakier than I remembered, but still clearly hers. "Jack," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you probably need to know something I should have told you while I was alive." I kept reading. "Alana came to see me last month. Wanted to talk about financial planning and making sure the house wouldn't be a burden on you when I'm gone. She suggested putting her name on the deed for tax purposes. Made it sound like she was trying to help." My hands tightened on the paper. I told her no. The house is yours, not hers. It's been in our family for 37 years. Your father bought it the year you were born. It's not just property, it's history." The letter continued. She didn't like that answer. Got upset, said I was making things complicated for you, said you'd agreed to the change but were too busy to handle the paperwork yourself. I could picture that conversation. Mom polite but firm, Lana frustrated that her charm wasn't working. I didn't believe her. I watched how she looks at things, Jack. She sees walls where you see roots. She sees dollar signs where you see memories. The final paragraph hit like a punch to the chest. "If anything happens to me, don't let Lana near the house. She'll have reasons. She always has reasons. But the house belongs to you, and it should stay that way. Trust your instincts, even when trusting them hurts." I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Mom had known. Not just suspected. Known. Lana had tried this exact same thing 2 years ago and been turned down flat. This wasn't grief-driven confusion or opportunism. This was a plan that had been 2 years in the making. I drove home in silence. The house felt different now, quieter, like a weight had been lifted. Lana's car wasn't in the driveway. Her clothes weren't in the closet. The personal items she'd scattered around over 8 years of marriage were gone. She'd moved fast, efficient, just like she'd moved Paige into Mom's house. On the kitchen counter, she'd left her house key and a note. "We need to talk when you're ready to be reasonable." I picked up the note, read it once, and dropped it in the trash. Some conversations aren't worth having. The phone rang. Lana's number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 20 minutes later, again an hour after that. I turned it off and sat in the quiet of a house that finally felt like mine again. Outside, the sun was setting. Inside, everything was exactly where it belonged. The chair was right where I left it, under the tarp in the garage. Mom's old reading chair, blue fabric worn soft from decades of evening books and morning coffee. I'd moved it out there myself 3 months ago, when she got too weak to sit in it comfortably. I dragged it back through the house, past the empty spaces where Paige's things used to be, into the living room where it belonged. The chair fit perfectly in its old spot by the window, like it had never left. Next, the curtains. Paige had hung some modern geometric pattern in black and white. Clean lines, contemporary style. They looked expensive. I took them down and folded them neatly on the couch. Mom's originals were in the hall closet, wrapped in tissue paper. Cream-colored lace with small flowers embroidered along the edges. She'd made them herself 40 years ago, back when she had time for projects like that. I hung them carefully, making sure they fell the way she'd always liked them. The afternoon light filtered through the lace and scattered flower patterns across the hardwood floor. The room looked like itself again. I walked through the rest of the house, room by room, putting things back where they belonged. Mom's coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet, her book of crossword puzzles on the end table. Small things that made the house feel lived in instead of staged. The last task was the locks. I drove to the hardware store and bought new deadbolts, good ones, the kind that take effort to break. Installing them myself felt important, my hands on the tools, my key in the new locks. No locksmith invoice declaring anyone else as owner. The work took 2 hours. When I finished, I stood on the front porch and tested each lock twice. The house was secure, quiet, mine. I didn't call Lana, didn't text her, didn't explain or justify or negotiate. The divorce papers went out a week later, signed, sealed, and filed. No message, no conversation, just a clean line between what was hers and what never would be again. My lawyer handled everything: division of assets, dissolution of joint accounts, termination of shared responsibilities, clinical language for the end of 8 years. Lana called twice, left voicemails asking to talk, to work things out, to discuss this like adults. I deleted both messages without listening to them completely. She never answered the divorce papers formally, just let her lawyer handle the legal responses, which was fine by me. Some endings don't need words. I went back to work, managed bridge inspections and drainage projects and all the ordinary engineering problems that had solutions you could calculate and implement. My supervisor asked if I was doing okay. I told him I was settling some family business and felt good about the progress. That was true. 3 weeks after the eviction, I drove to Mom's house one last time to check on things. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Chair by the window, lace curtains, the coffee mug in its proper place. I found Lana's old house key in my pocket, the one she'd left on my kitchen counter with her note about being reasonable. I'd been carrying it around without thinking about it. Now I knew what to do with it. I put the key in a small envelope, wrote 2 words on a piece of paper, and sealed it inside. Then I walked to the house where Lana was staying, her sister's place across town, and left the envelope on the front porch. No confrontation, no dramatic speech, no explanation required. Just 2 words that said everything that needed saying. Not yours. I drove home through the quiet streets of Spokane, past the courthouse where the divorce was being processed, past the bank where Two Pines Ventures had been frozen into nothing. The sun was setting behind the mountains. The air was crisp and clean. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe completely. Some problems solve themselves once you stop accepting them as permanent. Some battles end not with victory speeches, but with silence. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all.